In 1874, St Pancras Station was a shock to everyone. The Midland Railway needed to bring their lines straight to the heart of London. Barlow, their engineer, provided them with an awesome answer. At the time, the huge shed held not one, but 3 world records. It's over 200 metres long, it had the widest span at 75 metres, and today is still the tallest single-span construction in the world, 33 metres from the rail tracks to the apex of the arch. The great train shed at St Pancras is a unique structural design because it's one huge Gothic arch, like this, which is then tied with steel ties right underneath and across from one side to the other. But the trick is that the trains are on top of those steel ties, so trains and platform all sit across the arch like that, and the trains are in here. And then the whole lot is resting on cast iron columns which go right across the site and hold up the roof and the trains. And then there's, in fact, large buttressing walls either side as well. The kind of joyful part of that is that underneath all the trains they were able to store inordinate amounts of beer which were made in the Midlands and brought down for Londoners to get sloshed on. So this structure is clever because it takes the idea of Gothic structural architecture but makes it at such a gargantuan scale that it becomes the whole space is just one huge arch. This vast space is Gothic structure with absolutely no frills. But for the Victorians, not everything Gothic was about structure. If the train shed represents the high point of Victorian structural logic, then 2 steps outside the front of the station and you have possibly the Victorians' greatest piece of illogic, the Midland Hotel. This is where the Victorians conflated historic styles into a sort of grand, crazy, mad, bizarre confections that spoke to the city of their phenomenal confidence.
It was an amazing culmination of all that the Midland Railway wanted, to a point also an enormous expression of empire. This is a period when the Victorian Empire was at its height. It stretched its tentacles all over the world, so this was merely another part of it, the success, the power, the glory of Victoriana.
This was George Gilbert Scott's masterpiece. It's an explosion of exuberance and would have cost the equivalent of £300 million. Inside, its lavish public rooms have fallen into terrible neglect. But once this was the height of fashion and technology. But it was short-lived. The Victorian builders raced on, but they hadn't predicted the revolution in the plumbing department. Ensuite bathrooms and central heating became all the rage. Without this, the hotel was very quickly out of date. 500 rooms line these incredibly long corridors, skylights letting in the natural light. Now they are empty. But behind the sumptuous finishes, the use and understanding of iron spread from the adjoining station to hold it all up, including the most spectacular feature in the hotel.
It's probably one of the finest staircases within Great Britain. It rises a full 3 floors through the building, culminated in a vaulted ceiling, highly ornately decorated, with the representations of the 8 virtues, and the 9th panel is that of the coat of arms of the Midland Railway from the mid-1870s period. The wyvern, the beast that the Midland Railway sort of adopted as their logo, sits on top of the shield. The shield itself, 6 panels within it, and their representations of the 6 major cities the Midland Railway served at that period, from Bristol to Birmingham, to Derby to Leeds, all say major cities, and again a lovely example of the area and size of the area that the Midland Railway covered and considered their own. The structure of the staircase looks in many parts as though it's held up with great cast iron girders. Indeed, the interior of what you see there is cast iron, but a lot of the decorative effect, in fact, is plasterwork.
This hysterical, overstructured spider's web of flying stairs took Gothic architecture to a new realm. In typical Victorian form, Scott took a variety of old and mystical styles and injected them with modern construction techniques to make a whole new fantasy world. Buildings were no longer a product of how they were built, but why they were built. Logic was no longer needed. Up to the 19th century, architectural styles had their own internal logic, but the Victorians decided to throw out that logic and to allow themselves to do any style on any building. And by opening that kind of Pandora's box, they invented a style war which has really been with us ever since. Construction method no longer determined how the building would look.